It was a cold, quiet Monday evening in New Hampshire, February 9th, 2004. A black Saturn sedan skidded off a rural road and came to rest against a snowbank along Route 112, not far from the White Mountains. Inside the vehicle were signs of someone preparing for a trip, packed bags, printed driving directions, and bottles of alcohol. When a passing school bus driver stopped to offer help, a young woman stepped out of the car. She seemed shaken but calm. She declined assistance, saying she had already called AAA, even though self-service in that area was nearly non-existent. Moments later, the bus driver drove away. Within minutes, police arrived on the scene. But the driver, the young woman, was gone. Her name was Maura Murray, a 21-year-old nursing student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Bright, athletic, and ambitious, Maura was the kind of young woman who appeared to have her entire future ahead of her. Yet, in the days and hours leading up to her disappearance, her actions told a different story, one of secrecy, struggle, and a possible plan to vanish. The crash site was thoroughly searched. Footprints should have been visible in the fresh snow, yet there were none leading away from the car. Dogs brought in the tracker scent lost it abruptly just a short distance down the road, as if Maura had simply disappeared into thin air. Over the last 2 decades, her case has become one of the most puzzling and haunting modern mysteries. Did Maura walk away from her life, choosing to disappear? Did she fall victim to foul play after leaving the crash site? Or did she meet a tragic accident in the freezing woods of New Hampshire? With no body, no conclusive evidence, and no confirmed sightings, the disappearance of Maura Murray has inspired countless theories, online debates, and nationwide media attention. Some call it the first internet true crime case, a mystery that grew larger as strangers on forums dissected every detail, trying to solve what police could not. But beyond the theories and speculation, the truth remains painfully simple. A young woman vanished, and her family has spent 20 years searching for answers. This is the story of Maura Murray, her life, her final known movements, the investigation, the endless theories, and the legacy of mystery that continues to confound investigators and captivate the world. Before we begin, please remember, this documentary is created for educational purposes only. All details are based on publicly available information. Traces of Vengeance does not promote conspiracy theories or speculate beyond the evidence. Our mission is to preserve the memory of the missing, the murdered, and the forgotten. Now, let us step back to understand who Maura Murray was and why her disappearance has never stopped haunting those who search for the truth. To understand the mystery of Maura Murray's disappearance, we first need to understand Maura herself, not just the headlines, not just a case file, but the young woman behind it all. Maura Murray was born on May 4th, 1982, in Hanson, Massachusetts. She was the fourth of 5 children in the Murray family, raised in a working-class Irish Catholic household. Her father, Fred Murray, was a medical technician. Her mother, Lori, worked multiple jobs to help support the family. From a young age, Maura stood out. Those who knew her described her as intelligent, driven, and athletic. She was close with her siblings, particularly her older sister Kathleen, who would later play a complicated role in the story of her disappearance. Maura's childhood was not without struggle. Her parents divorced when she was just 6 years old. After the separation, she split time between her mother and father, while navigating the challenges of growing up in a large family that faced financial pressures. Despite this, Maura excelled academically and athletically, determined to carve out her own path. In high school, Maura became a standout in track and cross country. Coaches praised her endurance, discipline, and focus. Running became not just a sport, but a metaphor for her drive, always moving forward, always pushing herself harder. Her academic performance matched her athletic ability. She was described as highly intelligent, with a sharp mind and a quiet determination. These qualities earned her acceptance into the prestigious United States Military Academy at West Point, where she began her college career. At West Point, Maura initially thrived. She studied chemical engineering, ran track, and formed friendships with fellow cadets. But military life was demanding, and over time, Maura realized it wasn't the right fit for her future. She transferred to University of Massachusetts Amherst, enrolling in the nursing program, a career path she felt more passionate about. Leaving West Point was a pivotal moment. To some, it seemed like a step down from the prestige of a military academy. But to Maura, it was a course correction, a chance to pursue something more in line with her goals and talents. By 2004, Maura was in her junior year at UMass. She was living in a dormitory and balancing the stresses of clinical nursing classes with part-time work. At the time, she was also in a long-distance relationship with her boyfriend, Bill Roche, an Army lieutenant stationed in Oklahoma. Their relationship was serious, though like many long-distance romances, it carried its shared difficulties. Those who knew Maura at UMass described her as quiet but friendly, someone who didn't open up easily to just anyone. She was diligent in her studies, but she also had a social side. She liked to relax with friends, and she had been known to drink socially, something that would later play a role in the narrative surrounding her final days. While on the surface, Maura appeared to have her life on track, there were also signs of inner turmoil. The pressures of school, her relationship, and personal struggles seemed to weigh heavily on her. In late 2003, Maura was caught using a stolen credit card number to order food from local restaurants. The total was less than $100, but it was still a criminal charge. The case was scheduled for a court hearing in the weeks after her disappearance. For many, this raised questions. Was Maura under more stress than she let on? Could this have been part of why she chose to leave campus that February? Another crack in the surface appeared in the form of drinking and driving. Friends noted that Maura sometimes drank more heavily than she should have, and she had been involved in at least one car accident prior to the events of February 2004. Despite these struggles, Maura still had every reason to look forward. At 21, she had a promising career path, a serious relationship, and a kind of determination that had carried her through life's challenges before. To those who loved her, she was more than a headline or a case file. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a young woman navigating the messy, complicated transition into adulthood. This is what makes her disappearance so haunting. One moment, she was a college student driving north through the snowy roads of New Hampshire. The next, she was gone without a trace. To piece together what might have happened, we need to look not only at her life story, but also at the critical days leading up to her disappearance, when her behavior began to change, and signs emerged that something was troubling her deeply. When someone vanishes, investigators often look closely at the days, even hours, leading up to the disappearance. In Maura Murray's case, the timeline from February 5th to February 9th, 2004, is full of puzzling details, each one adding layers of mystery to her story. On the evening of February 5th, Maura was working a shift at her campus security job at UMass Amherst. Around 10:30 p.m., she received a phone call that seemed to shatter her composure. A coworker later described her as completely zoned out, staring into space, visibly upset. When asked what was wrong, Maura reportedly said only, "My sister." The details of that phone call remain murky. Some accounts suggest that Maura's sister Kathleen had called, distressed about being released from rehab, and getting into an argument with her fiancé. Others speculate the call may have been about something entirely different. What's clear is that Maura was deeply shaken. She cried at her desk for nearly 2 hours before being escorted back to her dorm by a supervisor. Just 2 days later, Maura had another troubling incident. On February 7th, her father Fred visited Amherst to help her shop for a new car. That night, Maura borrowed Fred's brand new Toyota Corolla to attend a dorm party. Sometime after midnight, while driving back, Maura lost control and crashed the car into a guardrail. The accident caused nearly $10,000 in damage. Police responded, but no sobriety test was conducted. Fred was upset, but he reassured Maura they would deal with the insurance later. It was the second car accident in just a few months, raising questions about Maura's state of mind. Some see this as evidence of recklessness, while others suggest she was overwhelmed by stress and perhaps drinking to cope. The next day, February 8th, Maura used her dorm computer to search for information that would later take on chilling significance. She looked up directions to Burlington, Vermont. She also researched rental properties and lodging in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. It appeared that Maura was planning some kind of trip, but to where and why remains one of the central mysteries of her disappearance. On Monday, February 9th, the day she disappeared, Maura took a series of steps that seemed deliberate but confusing. That morning, she emailed her professors and work supervisor, saying she would be out of town for the week due to a death in the family. In reality, no such death had occurred. The excuse bought her time away from obligations, but also suggested she did not want anyone questioning her absence. She then made several financial transactions. She withdrew $280 in cash from an ATM, the majority of her available funds. She also stopped at a liquor store, purchasing around $40 worth of alcohol, including boxed wine and bottles of hard liquor. Back at her dorm, Maura packed some of her belongings into boxes and neatly stacked them. Among the items she left behind were most of her clothes, textbooks, and school papers. On top of the boxes, she placed a printed email to her boyfriend, Bill Roche, that hinted at tension in their relationship. To some, this looked like preparation for a break. To others, it was nothing more than the actions of a stressed student trying to get organized. At around 3:30 p.m., Maura got into her black 1996 Saturn and began driving north. She stopped by an ATM to withdraw her cash and visited the liquor store before getting onto the highway. Surveillance footage shows her alone during these errands. Her exact route is unknown, but based on phone records and later investigation, it seems Maura drove north through New Hampshire. By 7 p.m., she had reached Haverhill, a small rural town near the White Mountains. It was along Route 112, also known as Wild Amanuensis Road, that Maura's car would soon be found. Her destination that night is still debated. Some theorize she was heading to Bartlett, New Hampshire, where her family vacationed in the past. Others think she was driving to Vermont, where she had printed directions. Looking at the days before February 9th, a picture emerges. A young woman under pressure, experiencing multiple accidents, lying to cover her plans, and withdrawing from her normal life. The mysterious phone call on February 5th, the car accident on February 7th, the searches for lodging in New Hampshire and Vermont, the false family emergency email, the cash withdrawal and alcohol purchase, the packing of her belongings in her dorm. Each of these details suggests that Maura was preparing for something, whether it was a short trip to clear her head, a secret rendezvous, or a permanent escape. But by that evening, whatever she planned would be derailed by the crash on Route 112, the last confirmed moment anyone ever saw her alive. By early evening on February 9th, 2004, Maura Murray had been on the road for several hours. She had withdrawn cash, purchased alcohol, and driven north from Amherst, Massachusetts, into New Hampshire. Her reasons remain unclear. But by around 7 p.m., her journey, and her life as we know it, would come to an abrupt and unsettling halt. At approximately 7:27 p.m., multiple 911 calls came in from residents along Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire. A black Saturn had run off the road and was stuck in a snowbank near a sharp curve. The car appeared to have spun around, facing the opposite direction of travel. When police later examined the scene, they noted that the vehicle had struck a tree on the driver's side and suffered front-end damage. Both airbags had deployed. In the trunk, investigators found some of the alcohol Maura had purchased earlier that day. A red liquid, believed to be wine, was visible on the car's ceiling and door. The accident itself was not especially unusual for the narrow, icy road. But what followed is what has baffled investigators and the public for nearly 2 decades. On February 9, 2004, Maura Murray's Saturn went off Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire, striking a snowbank. A passing school bus driver, Butch Atwood, stopped to help, but Maura declined, insisting she had already called AAA, a claim later proven false, since no such call was made. Atwood left to notify police. When law enforcement arrived minutes later, Maura was gone. Her car was locked, airbags deployed, and belongings, including alcohol and personal items, were inside. No footprints were found in the snow, and her trail vanished almost instantly. Police initially treated Maura's disappearance as a voluntary walkaway rather than a crime. A search with dogs traced her scent only 100 yards before it disappeared, suggesting she may have entered another vehicle. Helicopters, thermal imaging, and ground searches turned up nothing. Her family was informed until nearly 24 hours later. losing critical search time. Investigators pointed to stress and personal issues as possible motives for her leaving, while her father strongly believed foul play was involved. Early missteps and assumptions left the case cold almost immediately. In the immediate days following Maura Murray's disappearance, the focus was on physical searches, boots on the ground, helicopters in the sky, and dogs tracking every possible trail. But as days turned into weeks with no sign of Maura, the search expanded from the woods of New Hampshire into the realm of national media and, eventually, the boundless frontier of the Internet. From the very beginning, Fred Murray, Maura's father, was convinced his daughter had been the victim of foul play. He urged authorities to treat the disappearance as suspicious, not voluntary. Fred's persistence became the driving force behind keeping Maura's case alive. He conducted his own searches, distributed flyers, and spoke to anyone who would listen. Even as weeks became months, Fred refused to let Maura's story fade. His conviction resonated with others, inspiring volunteers and strangers to join the effort. But Fred's public determination also exposed tensions between the family and law enforcement. Police insisted they were doing all they could, yet their limited public updates left the impression that the case had stalled. This lack of transparency fueled suspicion and speculation. By late 2004, Maura's story had begun to gain traction outside of New England. Local news reports highlighted the strangeness of the case. A young woman disappears after a minor car accident, leaving behind all of her belongings, with no tracks in the snow and no body discovered. As true crime television grew in popularity, shows like Disappeared and 2020 featured Maura's case. Each retelling introduced her story to wider audiences and reignited interest. For viewers unfamiliar with the details, the mystery was as confounding as it had been on day one. But even as media attention expanded, answers remained elusive. Maura's disappearance is often described as the first internet mystery. Online forums such as web sleuths, Reddit, and independent blogs dissected every piece of information. Ordinary people pored over police reports, timelines, and interviews, sometimes uncovering new leads, other times spiraling into wild speculation. This online sleuthing had both benefits and drawbacks. On one hand, it kept Maura's story alive, ensuring constant attention and discussion. On the other, it sometimes spread misinformation, unfairly accused innocent people, and created conflicts between online theorists and Maura's family. The Internet became both an amplifier and a battleground. In the absence of clear answers, theories grew bolder and more divisive. Some insisted Maura had started a new life. Others were convinced she was murdered that very night. Still others believed law enforcement was withholding key details. By the 2010s, Maura's case had become a staple of the true crime genre. The documentary The Disappearance of Maura Murray aired in 2017, exploring both the case and the culture of online obsession surrounding it. The series highlighted the emotional toll on Maura's family, while also showing how internet communities had kept the story alive for over a decade. Podcasts, too, seized on the mystery. Shows like Missing Maura Murray dedicated entire seasons to analyzing her disappearance. The case became more than just a missing person story. It became a cultural phenomenon, a touchstone for how digital communities engage with unsolved crimes. What made Maura's disappearance resonate so deeply? Perhaps it was a perfect storm. A young woman in her prime, a mysterious crash, a vanishing in plain sight, and a complete lack of resolution. But there was more. Her case revealed something about modern society. Our fascination with mystery, our hunger to solve puzzles, and our collective frustration with unanswered questions. The Internet gave ordinary people the tools to investigate, to connect dots, and to keep the story alive long after the news cycle had moved on. Yet it also blurred the line between helpful investigation and harmful intrusion. Some family members expressed discomfort at the way strangers dissected Maura's life, speculating about her struggles and relationships. To them, she was not a mystery to solve, but a daughter, a sister, a loved one. Every anniversary of Maura's disappearance brought renewed coverage. Candlelight vigils were held. News outlets revisited the story, interviewing family members and revisiting old evidence. The persistence of the case in public consciousness is itself remarkable. Most missing person cases fade quickly from headlines, but Maura's has endured. This endurance speaks to the unsettling nature of her disappearance. It is not just a story of loss, but a riddle that refuses to be solved. And as long as there is no resolution, it will continue to haunt both investigators and the public. The unanswered questions. Despite 2 decades of attention, the same central questions remain. Why did Maura leave UMass that day? What exactly happened after she declined help from the bus driver? Did she vanish by choice, by accident, or by force? The aftermath of her disappearance has become a case study in how mysteries evolve in the digital age. From television specials to online forums, from podcasts to documentaries, Maura's story has lived on, not because of what we know, but because of what we don't. As the years passed and no answers came, the search for Maura Murray entered a new phase, one defined not only by the pursuit of truth, but by the relentless fight for justice and closure waged by her family. For most families of missing persons, the initial shock eventually gives way to grief, acceptance, and a gradual fading from the public eye. But for the family of Maura Murray, there has never been acceptance, only an unrelenting fight for answers. At the center of that fight is Fred Murray, Maura's father. From the very beginning, Fred refused to believe that his daughter had simply walked away. To him, the idea that Maura voluntarily abandoned her family and future was unthinkable. Fred quickly became the public face of the search for Maura. He organized searches in the woods near the crash site, speaking directly with volunteers and combing the landscape himself. He spent countless hours retracing Maura's possible steps, desperate for even the smallest clue. To Fred, every rock turned, every path walked, and every lead followed represented a chance to bring his daughter home. Over the years, he has described the pain of waking up each day without answers as unbearable. "I know she's not out there living some new life," he told reporters. "Somebody took my daughter." Fred's words reflected not just a theory, but conviction that has guided his actions for nearly 2 decades. Fred's determination often put him at odds with authorities. He accused the New Hampshire State Police of withholding information and failing to treat the case with urgency. In his view, the early assumption that Maura had run away poisoned the investigation from the start. In 2005, Fred filed multiple lawsuits seeking access to police records about the case. His argument was simple. Transparency could generate new leads. The police, however, resisted, citing the need to protect the integrity of an open investigation. The back and forth between Fred and law enforcement highlighted a broader tension familiar in many unsolved cases. Families desperate for answers versus investigators bound by procedure and secrecy. Maura's family never stopped looking for answers. Her father, Fred Murray, spent years searching New Hampshire and pushing police for transparency, while her sister Julie became a vocal advocate to keep Maura's memory alive. The family has criticized the early handling of the case and law enforcement's limited communication. Their persistence ensured that Maura is remembered as a beloved daughter and sister, not just a missing person case. In recent years, law enforcement and private groups have carried out new searches, including excavations at properties of interest, though no conclusive evidence has been found. DNA testing and forensic technology continue to offer hope. The 2017 Oxygen documentary series brought renewed attention to the case. Officials stress the case remains open, but after nearly 2 decades, Maura's disappearance is still unsolved. 2 decades have passed since Maura Murray vanished on that cold February night. Yet her story continues to echo across time, not only because of the mystery itself, but because of what it reveals about loss, resilience, and our collective fascination with the unknown. Most missing person cases fall quickly from the public's attention. Without answers, they quietly recede into archives, remembered only by loved ones and investigators. Maura's case is different. Her disappearance has endured as one of America's most haunting modern mysteries. Why? Perhaps because the circumstances are so confounding. A young woman, a minor crash, a brief exchange with a stranger, and then nothing. No footprints, no body, no confirmed sightings. Just an empty road in New Hampshire and an unanswered question. This riddle-like quality has made Maura's case uniquely enduring. Each missing detail creates space for speculation, and each unanswered question invites investigation. For Maura's family, the last 20 years have been defined by persistence. Fred Murray's tireless searches, Julie Murray's advocacy, and the unyielding love of siblings and friends have ensured Maura is remembered not only as a mystery, but as a person, a daughter, a sister, a friend. Their fight has highlighted the struggles many families of the missing face. The battle for transparency, the tension with law enforcement, and emotional toll of living without closure. The Murray family's strength has transformed Maura's case from a private tragedy into a public call for awareness. Maura's disappearance is often called the first internet mystery. In the pre-social media era, it was message boards and forums that first spread her story far beyond New England. Later, podcasts, documentaries, and YouTube channels gave new life to her case. This digital legacy has been double-edged. On one hand, it has kept her name alive, ensured continued pressure on authorities, and fostered a sense of community among strangers searching for truth. On the other, it has sometimes crossed into harmful speculation and misinformation. But there's no denying that without the internet, Maura's story may not have remained in the spotlight for as long as it has. Maura's case reminds us of a few sobering truths. That a person can vanish in plain sight, leaving only questions behind. That the first hours of an investigation are critical, and missteps can echo for decades. That families of the missing carry a burden that never fades, one of both love and relentless uncertainty. And that in the absence of answers, we as a society feel compelled to keep searching, because the alternative is to let someone disappear twice, once in the world and once from memory. Today, Maura Murray remains missing. Her case is still active. Somewhere, there may be answers, a piece of evidence overlooked, a confession unspoken, a discovery waiting to be made. Until then, her disappearance remains an open wound, a reminder how fragile life can be, and how easily the ordinary can turn extraordinary in the span of a single moment. As we close this chapter on Maura Murray, we remember her not just as a case file or a mystery, but as a young woman whose life mattered. A woman with dreams, ambitions, and loved ones who will never stop searching for her. If you found this story as haunting and thought-provoking as we did, make sure to hit subscribe and join us here on Traces of Vengeance. We explore the darkest mysteries, the unsolved crimes, and the stories that history refuses to let go. Bell turn on notifications so you'll never miss our next investigation. And remember, every crime, every mystery, every disappearance leaves behind traces. Together, we follow them in search of the truth.